Today we're going to talk about ellipses again, but this time we're going to talk about ellipses in standard form and how to deal with some transformations with it. It's going to be very similar to what we did when we worked with parabolas this way, where we're going to have to complete the square and get these things into a spot where we can see these h and k values and shift them. So we're going to start right here. This is an ellipse. We're going to start with that and tell you that right off the bat. But what we need to do is we need to make this thing look in general like that. Now what's going to happen with this setup though is it's not just going to be x squared and y squared on the top, because we're going to have to complete the square, which is going to give us some transformations for this. Meaning, now I have this labeled a squared, this labeled b squared, but it could be flipped depending on, of course, which number is bigger. But what's going to happen with this is we're going to get x minus h squared over a squared. We're going to get y minus k squared over b squared equals 1. And these right here are going to be our transformations with this thing. Those are going to tell us how far up, down, left, right this thing has moved when we go and we solve it. So the first thing here is we got to put the x's together, the y's together, and I like to put this other number off to the other side before we start, but this one's already there. So this is the part that we're going to need to complete the square with, because we have two x's. We're not going to have to do anything with this y right off the bat. So the first thing we need to do with this is we need to factor out that 9. Now, nothing else about this is going to change. I'm only going to be working with this part as I work my way down. So this is what needs to go in the box with the extra box to factor it. And this is x squared, this is minus x, this is minus x. Those are both 1. And negative 1 times negative 1 gives you a positive 1. Means we have to balance that with a negative 1. And we're going to get negative 1 on the top on that one, an x, a negative 1 here, and an x, which means that this will complete the square into, it's going to be x minus 1 squared. And we're going to have minus 1 right here. All this stuff here just kind of along for the ride right now. We'll get to it in just a second. Okay, now we need to distribute and clean this thing up a little bit. So we're going to multiply that 9 through. So we're going to get 9x minus 1 squared minus 9 plus 4y squared. That's 27. Let's move this 9 to the other side by adding it. So that's 9x minus 1 squared, 4y squared equals 36. So now we need to make this equal to 1 and divide all this stuff out. So when we divide everything by 36, this is going to be x minus 1 squared. Let me make that a little bit prettier. And this is going to be a 4 on the bottom, plus y squared over 9 equals 1. So that's how we complete the square and get this down into here. Once we get to this spot, we're right back to where we were yesterday. So that means that since 4 is smaller than 9, this is the b squared. That makes this the a squared. So this information right here tells us that a squared is 9. So that means that a is 3. B squared was 4. That means that B is 2. We're going to use this because C squared is A squared minus B squared, so that's 9 minus 4. So that means C is going to be the square root of 5. So there's our 3 pieces of information we need to write our focus, vertices, and everything else. Now the only thing we'll have to account for here is that this is going to change the position of our points. This is attached to the x, and it's backwards. They're all backwards in all these conics. So that means that this is going to move our graph to the right by 1. So what we'll need to do once we find these points without this is we'll take, without this transformation, we're going to take all the x's and we're going to add 1 to them. So let's find our focus, vertices, foci, vertices, and minor intercepts. And then we'll transform them. So based on this, so one thing we didn't look at, what's the major axis? Because that tells me whether we have focus vertices on the x-axis or the y-axis, because those always fall on the major. Oh, since 9's bigger and it's under the y squared, that means this is a y-axis major. It's going to be longer on the y-axis. So our foci points on our vertices are going to fall on the y-axis. So that means focus was determined by C, and that's going to be a y value. Our vertices are also going to be a y value. Those are determined by A. So that's going to be 0 plus or minus 3. And our minor intercepts are B's, and those are going to be X's, plus or minus 0. Now, the only thing we have to do is we need to take all of these points, and we need to add 1 to the X value. So 0's plus 1 is pretty easy. This is going to be 1 plus or minus the square root of 5 for the y, because that's 2 points. It's going to be 1 plus or minus the square, plus or minus 3. This one's a little bit tougher, because this is going to be 1 plus or minus 2, 0. Now each one of these actually stands for 2 points. So for example, this one is 1 square root of 5 and 1 negative square root of 5. This one right here, 1 plus 2 is 3, so that should be 3, 0. 1 minus 2 is negative 1. And then we get a 0 here. So our picture actually looks something like that. So we stated which axis was the major. We found the focus, vertices, and minor intercepts right here. That's what all this information is right here. I prefer you list them as 2 points, even 2 points together, like I did right here, rather than splitting them apart, but I did want to talk about it as we went through, make sure we remembered that. Let's try one more before we move on. All right, so same thing, just have to complete the square twice. So the way that I'd like you to start this first, you got any constants, things that are just numbers, just toss them to the other side. So we're going to move this over here. It's going to be negative 225. And then we're going to group this stuff together by the x squared and the x's. So that's 6x with that. Then we're going to get 9y squared minus 90y. So we're going to have to complete the square twice over here for this one. So there's no factoring that I need to do for this one. This one can go straight into the box with the extra box and make this work. So this is x squared, so that gives me an x and an x. We've got to split that 6 in half, so that's plus 3x right here. And 3 times 3 is 9, so that's going to be plus 9 to make that factor. So this is plus 3, and this is plus 3. Since I added 9 here, I've got to minus it up here. So when I go to minus this thing, we get negative 9. So that means this factors into x plus 3 squared minus 9. Now this one's going to be a little bit tougher because I've got to factor that 9 out first. So that's y squared minus 10y. And I'm going to put this into the box with the extra box, just like I did before. So we're going to get y squared here. We're going to split this in half. That's negative 5y. That's negative 5y. And then we're going to go negative 5 times negative 5, and that gives us 25. So that's minus 25 right here. So don't forget this 9's multiplying everything. So let's move this down just a touch so it matches up where the other stuff's going to be. So that means we have plus still, because we factored a positive 9. 9 times, and this is y minus 5, y minus 5. So we're going to get y minus 5, squared. And it's going to be minus 25 in here. And that's still equal to this negative 225. Now I need to distribute this so I can move everything and get it into the right form. So this is x plus 3 squared minus 9 plus 9y minus 5 squared. And 9 times negative 25 is negative 225. So I'm going to need to add this stuff to the other side, and then I'll have to divide it back over to finish it up. But I get x plus 3 squared plus 9y minus 5 squared. Those are going to be positive when they move over here. Those will cancel each other out. So we just get a positive 9. And now we're going to divide it to the other side. And we get x plus 3 squared over 9 plus y minus 5 squared over 1 equals 1. So let's go through and pull information from this part. So the major axis is going to be the x this time because this is bigger. It's going to be the x-axis. So that means, since this is major, that means our foci and vertices are going to be on the x-axis. So when we go through and we do this, let's ignore these transformations and then come back for them. So a squared is 9. So that means that a is going to be 3. B squared is 1. So that means b is 1. And we're going to do a little bit of math here. C squared is going to be 9 minus 1. So it's going to be the square root of 8, which is 2 root 2. Now let's list our transformations up here so we don't forget about them. So our transformations that come from this plus 3 attached to the x is going to move us left by 3. So that means we're going to take the x's and minus 3. And then that minus 5 right there attached to the y is going to move us up by 5. So we're going to take all the y values and we're going to add 5 to them. We're going to find them ignoring that first, just like we did before. And then we're going to apply those transformations to find those points. So let's do focus, vertice, and then our minor intercepts. So our focus, since our major is on the x, these are going to be x values, and our focus comes from the c. So this is going to be plus or minus 2 square root 2, 0. Our vertices come from the a, so that's going to be plus or minus 3, 0. And our minors come from the b, and they're going to be on the y. And now we just need to transform all these things by doing these, changing these x and y values the way that we predicted up here, and we'll find our final answer. So let's do the x first. So we're going to take all these x's and we're going to minus 3 from them. So this is plus or minus 2 root 2 minus 3. This is plus or minus 3 minus 3. And this one's 0 minus 3, which is always going to be negative 3. Those are the x values. Remember, each one of these is going to represent 2 points. So now we're going to take the y's, we're going to add 5. 0 plus 5 is just 5. 0 plus 5 again is just 5. And then plus or minus 1 plus 5. We're going to actually write that out. Plus or minus 1 plus 5. Now, if we needed to find both those points, that wouldn't be too bad. We could go ahead and get that taken care of, but I'm okay with us listing them like this when we go through and see these answers. But there's all 6 of those important points. We could easily create a sketch if we need it.